Hey everybody. I can't think of a better thing to do on a beautiful afternoon like this than to spend time with North Carolina conservatives. 31 days before, as Matt already said, the most significant, most consequential election in our history. You know, though, today, it's all the more poignant because our commander-in-chief and some of our soldiers are down, right? And we want to pray for the stricken, but more than that, we need to take their place. We need to step up to the extent they have to step back. Today's title is America versus Socialism, and I think that's another aspect of this election if you reflect on it. It's not only the most consequential election in our lifetimes, it's the most fundamental, the most basic. And really, for most of my lifetime, the two parties have been agreed on major principles, and they had different approaches in how to achieve the best flourishing in America within, an agreed upon kind of regime or scheme. But that's changed. And so we are very much today in a situation of America versus socialism. And I think if you think about that for a while, you can see it and think about it in terms of themes. On the one hand, we have those who recognize the importance and the necessity of courage and confidence and strength. And another ideology that's hinged on doubt, fear, and weakness. So confidence, courage, and strength versus doubt, fear, and weakness. And the left uses disorder and chaos in order to produce the latter and to undermine the former. Think about how many ways that applies today in America. Think about the reaction of media and the left to COVID, to the president's efforts to keep the American people's confidence up, to inspire their courage to face difficult circumstances and tragedy, and to recognize that we can't simply give up. We have to soldier on. The president, in that context, has encouraged us, has given us confidence. And the media has attacked it as not being on the level. And you heard the president say in his debate the other night that every time the Vice President Biden has an opportunity to be in public, he makes a point of being 10 times farther away than he needs to be, have a mask twice as big as it need to be. Why is that? Is it for the purpose of engendering the idea of being reasonable, careful, and cautious, all of which is very good? Or is it to send another signal? Is it to send a signal of fear and doubt and discouragement? So that's in the COVID context. Think about what we've witnessed in our cities across the country over the course of the summer. Rioting and destruction, arson, looting, injuries and killings, city after city. Portland, of course, continuously. Seattle, Chicago, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Rochester, New York. Day after day, week after week, month after month. Is that the purpose? Is the purpose of all that to build up American righteous indignation and confidence and boldness so that we can go forward and make change? Or is it a purpose? Is it premised on spreading fear and doubt and discouragement? Let me turn to another thing, and I want to give you some good news in the course of doing it. You've all heard, because you're paying attention, that in North Carolina, Mark Elias, a lawyer for National Democrats, has filed, and others also, Democratic plaintiffs and lawyers, have filed about a dozen lawsuits this summer in order to get a judge, eventually, to change the way we operate absentee balloting in North Carolina, absentee ballots by mail, in order to supplant the will of the legislature with the decisions of a judge. I want to give you a little bit of an update on that. Because if any of you happen to follow my Twitter, I really got into this the other night and explained where we were. But the North Carolina State Board of Elections, under the advice of Democrat Attorney General Josh Stein and Democratic Governor Roy Cooper, who controls that partisan Board of Elections, they proposed to enter into a settlement with Mark Elias's plaintiffs in a lawsuit just filed in August. And they went and told in private, they advised the board, including the minority Republican members, that they had to keep quiet, couldn't say anything about what they were being advised, and that they probably were going to lose. Well, that was a strange thing to say because they'd already won every step along the way in defending, with the help of the legislative leadership, defending our rules and regulations that the General Assembly updated this summer. But they entered into what we call a collusive settlement. And they've asked a judge, the same Democrat Superior Court judge in Wake County, who has ruled previously in a ruling overturned that the General Assembly is a usurper body and that it doesn't have the power to act. Outlandish decision. But they got that judge just the other day, just Friday, to endorse their settlement. But then what happened today? Legislative defendants, legislative leadership, and others, including me, filed lawsuits that ended up in front of Jim Dever, a federal judge in the Eastern District of North Carolina. And so Judge Dever today entered a temporary restraining order restraining the Democrat Board of Elections from implementing their settlement. And let me just read just 3 lines from this judge's order. The money lines are on page 15. He says, at bottom, the North Carolina State Board of Elections has ignored the statutory scheme and arbitrarily created multiple disparate regimes under which North Carolina voters cast absentee ballots. The Board of Elections inequitably and materially upset the electoral status quo in the middle of an election by issuing the memoranda. These are memoranda that change the way things are going to operate. And giving the memoranda legal effect via the October 2, 2020 consent judgment. The memoranda, by materially changing the electoral process in the middle of an election after over 300,000 people have voted, undermines confidence and creates confusion for those North Carolinians who have yet to cast their absentee ballots. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to reflect on the fact that another judge, just the day before, that Democrat judge, the same one who entered that subsequently overruled decision that said the General Assembly, the representatives of the people, are a usurper body without power to act. How come that judge didn't observe these same obvious points? Because they sow chaos and disorder. They don't believe that they're acting consistent with law. They look to exploit weaknesses in our system that can be exploited on a temporary basis in order to gain an advantage, and they don't care whether it is consistent with the rule of law. It is an attack on the rule of law. So, ladies and gentlemen, we all have a mission, every one of us. And if another one should fall to COVID, someone else needs to step in their place. Let me just tell you 2 things that I'm doing and why. In response to the chaos in the cities nationwide, I've introduced 2 pieces of legislation in the House of Representatives. One's called Chopping Cash for Chaz Act. And in that bill, provides that any city in the United States where municipal officials permit a chaos zone, an anarchy zone, to persist more than 7 days will receive no more federal funding. And when you consider that Seattle receives, for example, $3.3 billion a year from the federal government, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, if local officials will not meet their responsibilities, their fundamental responsibilities to protect life and property and safety in their communities, the federal government, the taxpayers of North Carolina through the federal government, certainly are not going to subsidize that wrongdoing. And I filed another bill. It's called the No Riots Act. And its effect is, right now, if someone engages in rioting and travels interstate to do it, or uses a means of interstate communication to coordinate their activity, like a telephone or social media, that's criminal under federal law already. And if a federal law enforcement officer is injured in the process or killed in the process of such activity, that would be criminal under federal law as well. But there's no protection currently for state or local officers under the federal law. My bill would extend that to those officers to see to it that our brave men and women on the front lines of law enforcement, federal, state, or local, who are injured because local officials are not responding as they are required to do, they'll meet penalties under federal law. Now, you may say, well, you're not going to get those bills through Congress. Nancy Pelosi controls your House. And that's true, ladies and gentlemen. Right now, that's not going to move forward. But what it does do, and everything like it, is using all the tools in our toolbox to spread the message, to get us all moving in the way that we need to move in this country. There are other things that we could do. So there are more things that we can do, but we got to make progress. The fact is this: the wolf is at the door in this election, ladies and gentlemen. The American people need to choose America versus socialism. We need 4 more years for the president. We need a Supreme Court justice to proceed through the confirmation process as the Constitution envisions. We need to hold our majority in the United States Senate, to win a majority in the United States House of Representatives. We need to replace a tyrannical governor in North Carolina who governs from the point of view of arbitrariness. We need to hold the legislative majorities that we have. And ladies and gentlemen, we need to make sure that the court that I just described, that judge who's relying on the fact that he can create disorder and a system that takes time to come to final decisions, those sorts of judges need to be off the bench in North Carolina. And we have to turn the tide in our larger culture, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to take us long, but after we finish the mission that we're on right now, we're going to have to end the revisionist history and the hatred of capitalism and American flourishing that you see in our academia. We're going to have to respond to those who promote a culture of a lack of hard work, that make hard work the enemy. We need to respond to those who would deny and defeat our structures that exist to serve order, like law enforcement. No one in America should fail to back the blue, ladies and gentlemen. And we need to make it clear that cancel culture is as un-American as anything you could imagine. That free speech is fundamental to American way of life that's been the best for flourishing anywhere in the world. You know that people don't accept anarchy in the streets overnight. It's something that takes years and years to build. And we've allowed it to go on, ladies and gentlemen, too long. So here's what we have: 31 days until the most significant election in our lifetimes. Some of our soldiers are on the sidelines. And we need to stay in the action. Stay in the game. Use every tool at your disposal. And if the line's wavering next to you, if your neighbor's wavering, you pump them up. When people ask you, how's this going to play with the president having COVID? Say he's going to lead through his experience with COVID the same way he's led through all of ours. He's going to inspire confidence. He's going to be tough. And we're going to be right there with him, ladies and gentlemen. God bless you all. Glad to see you.